Da, da, da. Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, and I'm reporting live from our little cabin in the woods, Murphy's Law. And I'm here tonight with a friend that I've known since my Barron's book days, because that's when I first read about these books, which is this is Touched, which is a book she wrote. Gosh, I don't even know what year it was, but I was back at Barron's until, let's see, I think 1990, something like that. And then she wrote Summer of the Redeemers, and she's got written 80 books. Now, the thing about Carolyn is not only is she a prolific writer, I was just teasing her that she's the James Patterson of writing, only she does it by herself. Sorry, James, I love you too. So, but anyway, Carolyn is a master storyteller. She is, I'm so jealous because she's the recipient of the Harper Lee Award, which to me is the most important award in the world, because To Kill a Mockingbird is my highest mark and standard for the books that I select for the Pulpwood Queens. It's got to be of that quality. So this book is 5 diamonds in the Pulpwood Queen tiara, and I can really tell you that with all of them, really. And that's my highest mark. She also won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the library where she lives, and she also was inducted into the Alabama Hall of Fame for writers. She has won so many awards, and she is an animal activist and rescuer. She's a lovely, wonderful person. But the best thing about Carolyn is her stories, because every time I'm with her, she tells the best stories. So welcome, Carolyn, and everybody here. If you haven't met her, you will hear about her now. Go ahead, Carolyn. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, thank you. Well, I was raised in Lucedale, Mississippi, which is about 40 miles from where I live. As you can tell, I barely escaped. I went to the University of Southern Mississippi and got a degree in journalism. And I worked in journalism for about 10 years. I ran a statewide bureau in Mississippi, and my mother worked for me, which was kind of amusing. And it turned out one of the best things was I was taking horseback riding lessons, and I had done my work for the week. I'd been to the board meetings and done the stories and all that stuff. So I went out to where I was taking riding lessons, and I was taking a lesson, and I didn't even have a car. Mama had dropped me off while she went to do something else. And she calls me on the barn phone, and she says, "They're having an armed robbery at the grocery store down the highway. Go check it out." And I said, "I don't have a car." She said, "Ride the horse." In that,
did you really ride the horse?
I did.
I did. It was fun. Annie Oakley, go to town. Okay.
This was a while back. I was much younger and friskier then, so that was fun though. And I really loved being a journalist. I did. I did a lot of crazy things. I covered the World Championship horse event in Kentucky, and they had stadium jumping, dressage, and cross-country eventing. And I'm packing 40 pounds of camera equipment. And the cross-country course was 5 miles. And so I'm trying to photograph different horses that I think are going to win. And so I'm running as hard as I can across this field. I mean, I am booking it. And I've got the camera. I'm checking to see if I can get the shot. And I hit somebody so hard, it knocked me to the ground. I mean, it knocked. And then these 3 burly guys jump on top of me. And I'm like, get off, get off, get off. And
why did they jump on you?
They were bodyguards for Prince Philip, and I had smacked into him like
a oh my God. My God. Carolyn, I've never heard that one.
Get off, that young lady. And he helped me up, and he said, "Go get your shot." And I said, thanks, and took off. It didn't register on me who he was until later.
Oh my gosh.
Mm,
You've got to write a book about these stories, Carolyn.
no.
I hate to interrupt, but if you don't write these stories, because I try to retell 'em, I can't do it. I mean, the last one you told us last time about your mom and the ghost, and oh my God, I just was on. But I can't. You got to write them down, please, please, please. I beg of you. Okay.
Well, I had asked a question earlier about people who had been struck by lightning. And when I was a little girl, we lived on the corner in Lucedale, and behind us was Mr. and Mrs. Hart. And Mr. Hart was a pharmacist at the Lucedale Drug Company. And they were, older, and he started to lose his hearing. And one day he was taking a nap with his wife in bed, and lightning struck a tree right outside their bedroom, and it jumped to the iron bedstead in their house. Got his hearing back. It
No
blasted,
way.
I swear it blasted his hearing back. But
That's
I have a
right.
lightning story of my own.
Oh, well, tell.
Of
Do
course, it's
tell.
naughty, but I went horseback
Anyway.
riding up the western coast of Ireland, and I was so taken with the horses there. And TK, you'll know about Connemara. Yeah. So I had a thoroughbred mare, Miss Scrap Iron, and I decided that I loved this horse. So I decided that I would pay for sperm to be flown from Ireland, and my veterinarian would impregnate my horse. So it's all set up, but it happens to be on the night that I'm having a writers meeting. We had a critique group of the Deep South Writers Salon, and I was supposed to be cooking dinner for them, and they were all supposed to come out at 6 o'clock and do the thing. Well, I got hit by lightning about 4. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have anything. Everything in the house was out. The stove, the TV, telephone, everything. This was before telephones. Everything was gone. I was having to drive like a quarter mile to the neighbors to use her phone to call all the women to tell them, bring food, I can't cook.
Oh my God, I got hit by lightning.
And while you're on your way out here, stop by the airport. They're supposed to ship my sperm today, and they've lost it at the airport. And so I said, just go in there and tell them you're me, and get my sperm and bring it to me. I know it's there. I've tracked it. And so 5 women, all of them very different, stop at the airport and go up to that poor little baggage guy and go, my name is Carolyn Haines and I demand my sperm.
Oh my God.
Nobody could find it. So I made them, they got out here. I made them get in. I had a minivan who my agent had wickedly told me only lactating females drive.
I had one. Yeah, damn minivan. Yep. Okay.
So we drive to the airport, and I get out and I walk up to the baggage guy, and he looked at me and he said, don't tell me you're Carolyn Haines and you demand your sperm. And I said, that's absolutely right. Where is it? And he said, it didn't come in. I promise you. I said, I know it's here. Can I look? I said, knock yourself out. This was before, 9/11 or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I go back in the baggage thing and I'm moving stuff. I find it. So
oh my God. Well,
the
is it
container.
like dry ice or something? Is it on
No.
dry ice?
Yeah, dry ice. So I've got this big cylinder thing and I haul it out to the car and all the women get in. And I'm about, 12 miles from the airport. Buddy, I put pedal to the metal. I'm going 95 miles an hour in a minivan and I get pulled over by a cop.
With these women and the sperm.
And I'm just sitting there and he comes up and I'm like, roll the window down. And he said, do you know how fast you were going? And I said, you know what? I have to go fast. I have live sperm. And he looked at me and he said, go. He didn't give me a ticket. He let me go. And I got home and the vet was here and he did his job, and a year later I had Kogar, my wonderful Connemara thoroughbred cross.
Oh, oh my gosh. Okay, I'm making notes of these. These are chapters for your new book. Carolyn Haines stories. You won't believe that they happened. They're for true. Okay. So that's absolutely the craziest thing. Now your mother and you had an unusual relationship. I think for a mother-daughter. And I want you to explain to everybody a little bit about that relationship because it's different. Can you do that?
Yeah. Well, Mama she contracted polio when she was 9, but it only affected one leg really. And she was in the little town of Lucedale, she was quite well known and a character. And she was kind of like a pet in ways until she got older and became a real thorn in their side when she got elected city alderman. But
Oh,
she would do some crazy things, and enlist us kids. Like every year we stole our Christmas tree. It was a family tradition. Now,
my
my parents didn't drink, so I have no excuses for this behavior. But we'd cut them out of fence rows and we had to borrow a pickup truck. We didn't have one because they had to be
yeah.
14 feet tall, right to
Oh,
the ceiling. Yeah, they were big trees. And one year Mama couldn't find a truck, so she borrowed the hearse from the funeral home, and we
no.
set the Christmas tree off Main Street in Lucedale. And Mama, the little arch criminal that she was, when we got the tree out and we had it in the yard, Mama goes, "Saw it again so it doesn't match the stump in case they come looking for us."
That's terrible. Oh my God. Did anybody ever come looking for the tree?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh. What was your mother's name?
Hilda Faye.
Hilda Faye. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. You know, that's, every time I hear a story of yours, I go, she can't ever top the last one I heard. Well, you're topping them tonight. So anyway, it's great. So give everybody just a little snippet of what this book is about. And you've got to read it, you guys, because you won't be able to put it down. But can you just tell everybody about it? Touched.
Yeah, Touched is it's a story of a mother and daughter, Johanna McVeigh and her daughter Duncan. And Johanna is a free thinker in 1926 Mississippi in a very repressive little town. And she's been to the opera, she's cultured, she reads, and she doesn't take any crap off men. And Duncan, her daughter, is 9 years old, and the book opens with them at a birthday party. And Duncan doesn't really care for the other little children, and she is named after Isadora Duncan.
Oh,
And
perfect.
yeah, so she decides she's going to dance the Charleston, and it doesn't matter that the other children and their mothers think it's, evil. So she cranks up the gramophone and she's dancing outside by herself, and she gets struck by lightning. She doesn't die. She's badly injured. And it ends up that her mother drives her pulls her all over town in a red wagon with a rocking chair in it. And Duncan's in the rocking chair, and on the back of the rocking chair is Duncan's pet rooster, Paco,
Yep.
he is one badass rooster, buddy.
Yep.
But their bond was so strong, and it was very much like the bond my mother had with her grandmother after the polio event. My mother, she loved her mother, grandma, and it was such an incredibly strong bond. And I had a very strong bond to both of them too, but I wanted to honor that and write the story. So the little girl survives, and she becomes prophetic, but she can only predict drownings. And the people in town believe that she's been touched by Satan, and therein sets up the conflict that is resolved finally 20 years later. But it's kind of, in writing the book, is kind of an interesting story because I wrote Summer of the Redeemers first, and it was published in 1994 by Dutton.
That's
and
right.
Touch came back out in 96. But the McVeigh family is in all three books, but they're really loosely connected together. But Duncan and Johanna, I wrote Summer of the Redeemers first person. And I really, I think I'm like you. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is one of the best books ever. So it's a young girl who lives on a dirt road in Mississippi in 1964, and she's spending the summer, and two things happen on the road. Well, three things. The Church of the Redeemers moves down to the end of the road. A horsewoman, a professional equestrian, moves on the road, and Becca's horse crazy. And her best friend's baby sister disappears. And so those are the things that shaped that summer for Becca Ridge. But I wrote that in first person. And I thought, I had the second book on the contract, and I knew the story that I wanted to write, but I thought I should write it third person. And I wrote the book, I wrote about 300 pages, third person, and it was lifeless. It didn't sing, it wasn't, and I couldn't turn it in because I knew it wasn't a good book. It really, the story was there, the characters were there, but it just was not properly executed. And I was in a dead panic. And one day I was sitting at the computer trying to figure out what to do. And I heard this voice, and it was a 16-year-old mail order bride named Maddie Mills. And she's married to the town barber.
Oh gosh, it was so powerful, that story. Wow.
What an abusive SOB he was.
Yes, he was.
So Duncan, so that I realized then that the story had to be narrated by Maddie, and it had to be first person. I was too close to Johanna and Duncan and what they represented to me, that I needed to take that step back and let an outsider narrate the story. And I wrote the book in like 2 months. Once I got that voice, it just was like, whoa! It just all came out.
Oh, I just loved her character, and that barber. Oh, I just wanted to strangle him.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good. But you got me hooked way back then, and I just, I remember when I worked at Barron's, people come in, what do I need to read? And I go, you better read everything by Carolyn Haines. And and my boss was just going, who is this woman? But I did that for all my authors. And you and Mark Childress were the two that I was so excited about winning the Harper Lee Award, because I love both of you guys and your friends. And let's see, didn't Fannie Flagg win too?
Yes, she did.
Oh, well, let's count her in because I love Fannie. So, but anyway, I almost wish I was from Alabama, just so that it would make me work so hard on a novel that, that to me, that it's like the Academy Awards, the Oscars. The Harper Lee Award to me is because I love Southern writing, Southern Gothic, Southern anything. And so Carolyn, you've got to write that book. But I want to open it up for everybody to start asking questions, because I know some of you haven't met Carolyn, and she's a trip. We've hung out at places, and you just never know what's going to happen, whether we were up in Alabama or over at Fairhope, whatever. It was just, we always have the best time. So turn your mutes off and speak up if you have a question.
Please ask questions, because I'll just, I'll go on and talk about crazy stuff.
Who's first?
TK.
Hey, honey, I love the sperm story.
I
Oh my
know.
God.
Well, you love
And
horses.
I love horses, and as a, retired law enforcement, I can imagine that story just topped every story that officer had to tell about why he let you go. And I'm sure he
I
got
bet he's
to
been telling it for years, you
Yep,
know?
yep, they do. That's the other one that's my favorite is stopping a guy when the flip phones first came out. And the officer said, you're in trouble, you did whatever he did. And the guy flipped his phone up and said, beam me up, Scotty.
Oh, gosh, that's great. That's great.
That's a good one.
But anyway, I wanted to, Carolyn, I asked you this on the Facebook post, but I'm wondering about genre. I remember reading somewhere on some post that you said you really were attracted to horror stories.
I love horror.
Yeah, okay. So I did read that. I didn't dream it.
Oh
And
no, her and her mom. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
so can you tell me how your stories or Southern Gothic in general, where the line is between horror, or are they just horror in a Southern Gothic clothing?
Well, we have another Gothic writer here who can help us if she will speak up. Carrie Dalby's a very wonderful, talented writer. And so she can help bolster this answer. To me, the Darkling and the Seeker are horror. They have a definite supernatural element, although they are also Southern Gothic because they have these overtones of, the South is just a weird place. And I'm going to tell you a Southern Gothic story to prove it to you in just a minute.
All right.
But books like Touch, there is, other than Duncan being able to predict drownings, there's not a supernatural element to them. The people, the characters are Gothic. The events that occur are Gothic. But Carrie, why don't you say how you would define it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And also with the Southern Gothic specifically, as opposed to other Gothic genres. Of course, obviously you have to be set in the Southeast of the United States. It's the only regional Gothic genre. But, and with that, you have the culture, the class separation, Jim Crow or slavery, depending on what era you're writing about, and all that. And usually there's also an element of sexual deviancy, which is in touch, and also madness, or like sometimes it runs in families type of thing, but or either madness or somebody that's disfigured or disformed. So of course Floyd, he was special, so he would have fit into that. But to me, Southern Gothic, what makes it that Gothic edge is the characters' choices are often horrifying. So you get the sense of dread like you do when you're reading horror, but it's because of the choices that the characters are making. And one of the things I love about the Gothic genre, especially Southern Gothic, is the happy endings aren't guaranteed. So there's no safety net when you're reading. And I didn't know about this happening tonight until this afternoon when I saw Carolyn post about it on Facebook, but I'm reading it. I have 40 pages left. So I was like, that's what I'm reading right now. So I'm going to chime in because I'm reading Touch. But yeah, the no safety nets, which I like when I'm reading, but in real life, I'm a chicken. So it's like, I want to know what to expect in real life, but not when I'm reading. I love that unexpected element. And yes.
But you can always shut the book and put it down when you read something.
Yes.
Would you classify Faulkner as Southern Gothic? Because there's so many Gothic elements in his work.
Some of them, yeah. But like a lot of the classics, like Their Eyes Were Watching God, of course, To Kill a Mockingbird, Erskine
Tennessee
Caldwell, Tennessee Williams. The
Yeah.
Southern Gothic was what was popular in like the 20s through the 50s. And so a lot of these classics people are reading are Southern Gothics, but they don't realize it because they're just labeled classics, not Southern
Classic,
Gothic.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Thank you.
It's
both of you.
interesting that Southern Gothic is, considered the South, because I grew up in Kansas and I could really relate to all the Southern Gothic stories because we got some pretty crazy people up there too. My favorite story was my grandmother used to take me to the Rexall drugstore at 10 and at 2 for her coffee break from their store with her sister, my Aunt Mabel. And I'd sit under the booth and look at the gum, under the table. And this girl would come in a slip, a young girl. And all she'd have on was, a slip. Those old kind of slips they used to wear under dresses with the lace at the top and the bottom. And she'd sit at the bar and she'd go, and the girl would look at her and she'd go, "I would like to order a cup of blood." And
my
I remember
gosh.
I'd peek my head out from underneath that booth and would just be staring. And she goes, "Just one moment." And she'd go back to the pharmacist and get Teddy Mariani, who was also my neighbor. And he'd call her parents. And here they come. And they'd be in a suit and a business attire. And they just escort her out the door. And I was just like, no, I never have found out who it was. But there was something definitely, it was kind of like Boo Radley, and it just stayed with me. And that's the way Carolyn's stories stick with me too. I mean, I can't tell them as well as I wish she could have told the story, but you've got to tell that story you mentioned, Carolyn. What was it that you were going to talk about?
Well, when I was a child, we had some neighbors who always had a garden, and the husband always played softball with us. And we had a backyard team, and he was a great guy. Sam was just a great guy, but he had diabetes and he lost first one leg and then the other leg. And so he couldn't be on the ball team anymore. But his wife, would bring him to visit Mama. And so we'd all make coffee, and Mama always had like banana pudding or pies or something cooked. She's a great cook. And so, everybody came by her house for coffee and, something sweet. And she was kind of like a psychiatrist, and she was an intuitive diagnostician. She could talk to her and she could touch you and she could give you a clue as to what was wrong with you so you could go to the doctor and get it checked out. It was a crazy way to grow up. But I was about 10 years old, and the neighbor, Sam's wife, calls and says, send one of the kids down. We've planted a new garden and things will be coming in. So I want everybody to get plenty so they can have some fresh vegetables or frozen. So Mama gives me a paper sack and sends me off down the road. I must have been about 10. So I stop at Miss Hattie and Miss Maddie's, the twin spinster sisters, Garrett Snuff, and I sit on their porch and talk to them for a little while because they loved me and I loved them. Then I stopped by the pond to be sure the leeches were doing good. My brothers were deeply invested in these leeches. And I went on down the road. Well, it's a Southern Gothic.
Yeah.
Gotta have a leech. So
We had them in Kansas. Okay.
I go on down the road and I finally get to Sam's house, and his wife had taken something for pain and she was not really feeling very good at all. And so she said, well, just go to the freezer and get what you'd like. And I'm like, great. So I go into the little room with the freezer, open the lid. There are Sam's legs wrapped in saran wrap in the freezer.
Oh my God. No. They gave him the legs?
But she worked at the hospital. They didn't really give them to her.
Oh my God. They wouldn't even let me see my gallstones. I can't imagine, somebody going home with legs. They were in the freezer? Why?
Okay. So
Okay.
I reach in, I get a few little bags of vegetables, and I go home and I tell Mom, and she's like, man, that's too bad. That's too bad. I hate to hear this. And I said, why? Why?
Why?
Isn't that illegal? And she said, you know what? I don't know why. But next time she's up here, ask her. So the next time she came up for coffee, I asked her, I said, why are Sam's legs in the freezer? And she looked at me and she said, honey, because when he dies, I want to bury him all together so that when he gets to heaven, he can walk.
Oh my God. See, there's another story. Were the legs bare?
They were wrapped in saran wrap. You could see the hairs on them. I didn't have any choice but to be some crazy Gothic person.
Oh my
Well,
God.
Carolyn, I live in the Northwest, so I definitely think Faulkner is Gothic. Some of his
Thank you.
stories.
Thank you.
But I do, because I read them like in high school and college. But we're kind of new out here, but we have ancient people here. We're the home of the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot.
Yes,
And
indeed.
it's part of the lore, but a lot of the storytelling that was done by Coast Salish people, that is also, we're hearing the stories too. And one is Sonequa. And Sonequa is probably about 10 feet tall. She's a woman that goes out into the forest. We have deep cedar and big forests here in the Pacific Northwest. And she'd go out there and collect kids. So that was kind of like the boogeyman that parents would tell their kids in our Indian cultures out here. And we have lots of logger stories, of weird things happening in the woods and stuff like that. But I don't know if it's totally defined. It's a mix of local culture and then storytelling, because we have so many different ethnic groups come to work in the fisheries and in the woods, like Norwegians, but you have Slavs and you have Welsh working in the mines and stuff like that. So
That would be fascinating, because I grew up in just, plain old Anglo-Irish thought. I mean, that's what
yeah,
region of Mississippi was settled by, 40 acres and a mule,
yeah, right.
Seriously. But my grandmother was she was from Sweden, but she
Oh, yeah.
immigrated when she was 6. And her family were loggers.
Yeah.
That's what her brothers and her father did. And they came down to Mississippi to work for the Luces, who owned, hundreds of acres or thousands probably of timber. And they would cut the trees, drag them through the woods by ox team, take them to the Pascagoula River and raft them and float them down the river to the sawmill. So these guys would go out and stay out 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
They had little cabins in the woods where they lived. It was just the men, and each cabin had a woman who would cook and clean and wash their clothes and kind of take care of them. And my Uncle Alfred, Gus, Johnny, and Andrew were all working in one cabin, and the lady who helped them was Rosie. And they thought the world of her. They really did. In fact, they bought her the first ever store-bought dress she ever had. It was written taffeta. And she loved that dress. She'd wash it and wear it and wash it and wear it. But one summer day, they were working, and her brother came and told her that she had to come home, that their mother was very, very sick and needed nursing care.
Mm-hmm.
And that the boys were working and they needed her to come home and take care of Mom. So the guys all told her to go, and come back when she could. And they took turns. They were assigned who to wake up, who to wash, So it was Alfred was the youngest of her brothers. It's his turn to get up and get the breakfast started, get everything going so they could get out into the woods and do their day's work. So Uncle Alfred said he woke up at the right time and he could smell the bacon cooking, and he heard there was like a long barracks where they were, and then the kitchen, and then Rosie had her little place away from the men, but there was a curtain between the kitchen and the barracks. And he said he could smell the coffee. So he knew he was back, and he just went back to sleep. And the other guys woke up and they were all furious with him because they were going to be late. It was late start. And he said, no, everything's done. Rosie's here. And they went into the kitchen, and there was the frying pan had bacon that had cooked in it. And the coffee pot was cold, but it had grounds and water. She'd made coffee. And on the edge of the stove was a little tear from that red taffeta dress where her hem had caught it. And her brother came that day and told them that she had caught the fever from her mother and had died that night.
Oh
Are
my
you
goodness.
kidding
Uh-huh.
me?
And they
Oh, I
said
got
it was a true
chills.
story. They swore it was. So this is my love of horror. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up on it. When we were bad, Grandma would recite Little Orphan Annie to us, and the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And we'd get in bed with her, and we wouldn't move a muscle because we didn't want to be got by the orphan Annie.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it.
Well, loggers have lots of stories too. And, our trees are huge. My living room is probably, I don't know, easily 13 feet across. And some of the cedars that they were cutting down in the 1890s, you could dance on the stump when it was done. Kinsey is our local photographer. He went around the camps from about, I think 1890, well into the 30s. And his photographs are absolutely stunning. Different places he went to, the different logging camps and showing life,
What's his first name?
It's Kinsey is his last name. If I think
I'm gonna
really
look him
hard,
up.
you know how hard, well, I can even find the link, but they are classic. And he was hired, but his wife actually helped develop. Her name was Tabitha, and they lived north of us here in a place called Cedar Woolley first, but originally in Everson, which is north of me. And so she did a lot of the developing, and they were quite a couple. And, back in the 10s and 08s, it's rugged. He would take his camera equipment up by horseback and mule and go wait. We're talking about Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, where I live, it's really, really rugged back then. So, but I did a lot of logging stuff. I wrote about Tree Soldier. One of my books is about the Civilian Conservation Corps, and then Timber Rose, which was, was a bonus a couple of years ago. That's actually the beginning of the Forest Service here in the Northwest, and it's a very interesting time because also women are climbing mountains in skirts, and it's out here. It's a really a great time of history.
They were great books because my only reference to it was the television show with Bobby Sherman. You remember the Seven Brides? What was it called?
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Yeah, remember that television show with Bobby Sherman in the 70s? I just thought he was pretty cool. But I've been up there. I've been up there twice, and Janet took me all around. It is gorgeous. If you ever get a chance to go. And Fred McKenzie, who had the bookstore with me, he was my 90-year-old used bookseller in the building I was downtown. His family was from Bellingham, Washington, where and there's a street named after their family in Bellingham when I was up there with all you guys. So these stories have connections, and then they make you want to go down those rabbit holes. So I'm really curious to I know these were reissued, but are you going to write anything more like these coming up?
It's kind of, I can't ever say what I'm going to write. I'm collaborating on a kind of a psychological thriller right now.
Oh, so that's right.
Yeah, that's kind of got my attention. And I just finished the 28th Sarah Booth Delaney book yesterday. I finished the first.
Lord.
It's called Jaws Bones, and it's about a bull shark in the Mississippi River. It's so tacky. I just love it. But
that sounds great.
It's true. They can live in fresh water, and they have been known to go from the Gulf all the way up to St. Louis.
Don't
Bullshit.
No.
Don't tell me that.
Oh my
Uh-uh,
God.
uh-uh.
That's why I don't swim in anything but a pool anymore because of these stories. When Jaws came out, I was a lifeguard at a lake. And I'll tell you what, in Kansas, fresh water. And I thought, there's no way there could be a shark. Now you're telling me that they can go up in fresh water?
Yep, and
No.
they often try to find some place like that so they can have their babies because they don't want to be down in the Gulf because
Oh,
there's so many bigger fish that will eat their babies.
where did you find out this story?
Oh, I read an article about a shark that was seen in St. Louis, and I thought, well, this could be a lot of fun. And in this book, Jitty is different water goddesses. You know, she's a mermaid, she's a this, she's a that. But in the final scene, she's this goddess named Lamia from Greek mythology who cheated with Poseidon. And so
Oh,
Poseidon's wife, Hera, killed her children. And in her constant grief, Poseidon turned her into a shark so she could eat other people's children.
oh God. You're so twisted.
Well, that makes a lot of
Love
sense.
I love
Of
it.
course, of course.
Okay.
Carolyn, I put the name of the photographer in the chat. So it's Darius Kinsey.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
he's brilliant. Oh,
I love Ansel Adams, the black and white
Yeah.
work from that time. Man. And I used to whine about carrying 40 pounds of equipment around.
I know.
Packed, easy 100 pounds because they had to have the glass plates and I mean crazy stuff.
Carolyn, I was thinking about you coming up and being at the book club meeting. As I was watching the other night, I watched the Academy Award film Till on Emmett Till. I knew the story. I had it in African American history. But were you a journalist when that was going? You were too young.
I was too young.
Yeah, you were too young because we're around the same age, right? I don't know.
Right. I think I'm a little bit older than you.
Well, that was a year before I was born when that happened. And I had forgotten that it happened in the 57. And I was born in 56. And I just thought, that it seems to me like that wasn't that long ago. It was 66 years ago. Okay. Because that's how old I am. But I just wondered, do you remember anything about any of that when you were growing up?
I did my only nonfiction book called My Mother's Witness. And I will never do another nonfiction. I won't. It broke me. But it was this woman named Peggy Morgan. She called me and asked me to write her story. And I was such a little goof. I thought, well, okay. She's been through a lot. It sounds like I'd like to try this. Her father knew the men who killed Emmett Till.
Yeah, it's a powerful movie, and I wish everybody would watch it because we need to be reminded that we're not animals, and that these men were like animals. They killed that boy.
Peggy knew Carolyn Bryant. In fact, Peggy believed that her father was having an affair with Carolyn Bryant. One who accused the young Till
girl that worked in the store. She was only 21.
Whistling at him. Well, and he was only 15.
He just went, big
That's
deal.
what she said. That's what she said, but there's no guarantee that's what really happened.
Well, half the stuff. Yeah, you're right. But people should watch it and then read there's not a whole lot of it in the history books,
No, there's not in Mississippi anyway, I can guarantee you.
Well, there was in my African American art history course. When I saw the photo of him after he was murdered and they found him, I have never been more horrified in my life what they did to that boy. It's awful. But I really think it's kind of like the Passion of Christ. You've got to watch it at least one time so you can truly understand how horrific it was and his cousin was on NPR and he's a pastor now. And he said to this day, it still haunts him because he was taken too to be lynched and they let him go. That wasn't in the movie. And I just think, what would it be like to grow up with that your whole life, having something like that happen? So anyway, well, I just was curious about that. Does anybody else have any comments?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. I'll come after you.
Okay. Carolyn, I'm curious as to the road that Touched took after the 90s with the publisher. Did you get the rights back, or
Well, I did
what happened?
back, and it was reissued by River City Press, and then reissued again by F&W Media, which was sold to Simon and Schuster. And then I got the rights back from them, and I indie published it. Just because I
You
wanted.
got to keep them out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had no trouble getting the rights back either time?
Well, no, really and truly, they had let it go out of print. They weren't,
Right.
That was the 90s. This is the, 2010s. So there was no advantage to them to hang on to it.
Well, now with ebooks, there is, so they can be stingy in giving them back.
Well, interestingly enough, I think I'm about to get the rights back to the first two Pluto Snitch books from Thomas and Mercer. I'm going to just see if they actually do it. All you have to do is send a letter and ask them for the return. And they either will or they won't.
Right.
And if your contract, like my contract states, a certain number of books must be sold annually for them to keep rights. And if that's not true, if that's not happening, then I can get the rights back. Or sometimes it's a length of time, like 5 years or 7 years or whatever.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
There's just so many books being published right now. They're just disposable commodities, unfortunately, so that's why people are doing more and more self-publishing and small indie publishing. And you've had great success with that, haven't you, Carolyn?
I wouldn't exactly call it great, but it is.
Call me out.
I've learned so much. I guess if you want to talk about riches, the knowledge is very, very good. And I've had a whale of a good time doing it. And I've also learned, it has taught me a great appreciation for a publisher. Because when you're a writer, you don't have any clue what publishing go. You do your book and you think, well, that's it. All they have to do is slap a cover on it and put it out there. But that's not quite how it goes.
Not at all. Yeah. So, well, if a publisher is listening, man, they ought to pick you back up, because I'm telling you, you're in your prime and you are a master storyteller. And if I was your agent, I'd be trucking to New York and saying, get us a new one of these, because you guys, this is for people that never discovered these during the 90s, you won't be able to put these books down. To me, they're just like To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, they are so well written, and they're storytelling at its finest. So I'm the biggest proponent for Carolyn Haines and her books, all of her books. And I hope everybody reads her book. Kathy Ramsberger had a comment.
Thanks, Kathy. Carolyn, every time you come, you create more questions in me, but I'm going to try and limit it to 2. And now I know another person that was struck by lightning. So that's my first question. That can't be the end of the story. You just got struck by lightning and you got up and drove to the airport.
No. A tree by the house got struck. And it traveled under, I had a telephone at the barn and some power, and it came up the lines and just blew up everything in the house. It didn't hit me.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
My uncle had a similar story. And thank you for your nice words, but the people died later. They didn't die from the lightning strikes that I've known. And actually they were hilarious stories.
But it seems like that severe of a blast, it could knock your heart rhythms just a little bit off or something. and I could see where you would die early from it.
Well, it's probably true. But I like just to think that they lived so well during the times that they were alive that I think they sort of knew. Like, I think they just came in to this life knowing this, I don't have long here, so I got to get a lot done.
Wow.
But my second question is about your nonfiction book. Because I'm trying to write a nonfiction book, a memoir right now, and I'm not having as good a time as with my novels. And so my question to you is, do you think it was the topic that there was a lot of crime that you were investigating, that you knew the people, or do you think it was that effort in your heart to be true to the story, that you could kind of deviate in fiction?
Well, and that is, as you hit the nail on the head. In nonfiction, the
Yeah,
facts dictate the structure of your book.
right.
Fiction, you control the structure,
I
and
know.
structure is everything in writing. And I was listening to John Barant, who
Yeah.
did Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And in one of his talks, he said that he changed the order of some
He
events
did.
to make it flow better structurally as a book rather than as true life events. And the thing with Peggy is her childhood was so wretchedly horrible. I didn't know her. She sought me out. I was working at the university and she had read Touched, and she sought me out and said, I want you to write my story. And I said, I don't do nonfiction. And she said, let me tell you some of it. And it was fourth grade. She failed fourth grade because she would sit by the window listening for sirens, because she knew her father was going to kill her mother, was going to beat her to death one day. He actually did. He beat her so severely she developed epilepsy and froze to death in a ditch.
Oh,
Jeez.
And it turned out the man she married was involved with Byron De La Beckwith, who murdered Medgar Evers.
Oh my God.
And Peggy
Wow.
spent she's dead now, but she spent almost her whole life in fear that she would be, that because she knew Beckwith told her he murdered Medgar Evers. They were riding to Parchman to visit her husband's brother who was in jail. So Parchman's Mississippi State Prison. And he told her he killed him.
And he
And-
killed him in front of his wife and little children. It's just horrible.
Yep. Oh, there go those glasses.
I want to read that book.
Another pair.
Well,
But-
you should read all of them. They're great. It
But
may be hard to write, but what a story,
it was horrific.
I love her others, but I didn't know Carolyn, I didn't know you'd written that one. I'm excited to read it.
No.
Carolyn, I feel such a kinship to you because I grew up not far from your hometown in Mississippi, a population of 1,000 people. And
Where?
Mount Olive,
I
Mississippi.
know Mount Olive. The Calhoun family has land there. My
Yes.
Uncle Cal, yeah.
There was a Dr. Calhoun there when I was a young girl, and 6 of my 7 grandchildren live in Alabama. So I feel a real kinship to you. And
guys ought to get together. Yeah.
The stories that came from our small towns, we never considered them anything but normal when we were growing up. That was just part of life, as a child in Mississippi. And now I look back and think, oh my Lord, I mean, we never even realized that was going on.
Well, we could ride our bicycles all over the place. Everybody knew us, which
Yeah.
was good and bad, because I can
Yeah.
promise you, whatever we did got back to my mother before we could pedal those bikes home.
Yes, they tell
Yeah.
us on Saturday morning after breakfast, we'll see you before dark. When the street
Yep,
lights come on, you have to be
absolutely.
home. And now our grandchildren can't play in the front yard without us being afraid that something's going to happen to them. So it was a whole different time back then.
The last golden childhood. You
Mhm.
know,
We had a freedom that was just,
Yeah.
I'd take off and go creeking and go all down the creek to Eureka Lake, 8 miles and back.
yeah.
And nobody ever checked on us. And we found the leeches and the snakes and the crawdads.
Yes.
But it
We
was
did.
fun.
But then there was also that horrific element, underneath everything in Mississippi. We didn't integrate until I was in the 10th grade, 1970. And, all of that just kind of went over our heads back then.
Yeah.
We didn't realize what was going on as children. I don't think our parents spoke in front of us about a lot. So, until you became an adult, you didn't realize, what was going on.
Yeah, they protected our innocence in ways.
Absolutely.
I never would have comprehended domestic violence or any of the things that I'm sure went on right under my nose, but I didn't know what to look for,
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
That's why these stories need to be told. And I'm always looking for those who I've never heard before. And Carolyn's given us about 5 of them. So I'm
Well, there's
thinking
so
about-
many things, in the 50s you didn't talk about. I remember
Oh,
we
yeah.
moved I grew up in Pittsburgh, and we had the same freedom in a suburb of a really big city, but we would be out till dark. We played stick baseball in the alleys. Our local policeman was kind of like Barney Fife. His name was Henry. That's all I remember. I remember his big cap, and we were always trying to do things to get him into trouble. But it was an innocent time, But my neighbor, when we moved down to Severn Park, Maryland, which is north of Annapolis, our neighbor, I remember my parents talking to our neighbor about this boy across the street that never spoke. And it turned out, he was well into 2nd grade. And it turns out he was being abused by the
Yeah.
father. And so, you wonder why a child acts that way. Now you'd be like, your ears would be all open. You're paying, what's going on over there? But back then you just you didn't talk about that sort of stuff. And our church had some kids come up from Mississippi, Black kids, and hosted them at our church. And, I remember, she was looking at our house, and it was the first new house my parents ever bought. And to her, it must seem like a palace. And I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed around her that I lived in such a nice place, and imagining, where she came from in Mississippi. And I'll never forget that feeling, she's saying, "Oh, so nice." And I didn't know what to say, because I could even feel I was by then in 10th grade, I think. And you just don't know what you have, but I was embarrassed too, that I had this and maybe she didn't have it.
My dad was from upstate New York, and my mother had polio. So she was in the Warm Springs Foundation for polio victims in Georgia. And Daddy was at Fort Benning. He was a paratrooper, and he volunteered to work with the young children in the pool to strengthen their muscles and things.
Oh,
And that's how they met. But Daddy, my mother, she was bad. She'd get mad at him about something, and she'd look at me and she would say, he's nothing but a damn Yankee.
That's the worst thing you can say about somebody.
He was
And-
swinging
In the
me
South.
one day.
true.
But
I moved to
Carolyn,
Texas.
No, because I
Carolyn-
married one.
Yeah. Yep.
you're
He
never
was swinging me
accepted.
one day, and he had to stop. He had to do something. So he stopped the swing because it was just a plank with chains. He was afraid I'd
yeah.
fall out backwards. And he put me on the ground, and he said, "Okay, we'll swing later, but I have something I have to do." And I looked at him and I said, "You're nothing but a damn Yankee." And he bent down, he kissed my cheek, and he said, "Yes, that's true. And you are half Yankee.
Okay, Carolyn, what's the craziest thing you did as a kid? I know one of the craziest things I did in high school was my girlfriends and I would pull over the cops and ask them if we could go riding around, and we did.
You
Can you imagine? You got today, if junior high school girls got in with the cops and went riding around, but we did that. And we went through the graveyard and did all Thrill Hill. What was the craziest thing you did?
Well, there were a few things, but probably at my mother's behest. I was grown. I was in college. And
Okay.
she says, bring some friends home from college. We have a mission. And I said, oh God, so I got 4 or 5 friends, spend the weekend in Lucedale with me. My mother was having a set to with the police chief, and she had borrowed a truck yet again, criminal mom. She had smeared the license plate with red mud. She had stood out in the backyard, filled 2 giant trash cans full of water balloons. We put them in the back of the truck. Us kids get in the back. She drives to the police station, backs up, and lays on the horn. And when they swarm out, we let them have it with the water balloons.
Oh my God. What happened?
About 3 o'clock in the morning, the dog started barking, and I looked out, and the entire police force is toilet paper in our yard.
Oh my
Knew it
God.
was
Oh
her.
my God. I thought
This-
oh my God. I thought of a story you told. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life about going down to Bow Bridge. Didn't you go down to
Oh my
Lafayette?
God, that's one of my favorite stories.
That's
Yeah.
my favorite. You got to tell everybody this story.
I'll do it quick because I know
Okay.
people have to go. But I had fallen under the sway of James Lee Burke. And
Yep.
I was just in love with his writing and with the whole experience of, that part of Louisiana, the Cajun Louisiana. And so I told my childhood friend, Diana, I said, come on, let's go over to Iberia Parish and experience this world. It's still there. We'll dig it up. And we stayed at a bed and breakfast that Dawn Hebert owned. She was the 1956 Mardi Gras Queen of New Orleans, and her daddy was U.S. Senator Eddie Hebert. And so we stayed at her bed and breakfast. And the first night she sent us to Mulots to watch the dancing because I'm stiff as a board. I'm the most ungraceful human being on the planet, but I have this lust for dance, and I really wanted to try it. And she sent us to this little VFW hall, essentially. They had a band, they had a bar. I didn't understand a word anybody said. I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I didn't care. Diana and I got in there. We didn't sit down. We danced the whole night, and we mostly danced with this one table full of men. And in fact, Diana said to me, she said, have you danced with the guy in the plaid shirt? And I said, yeah, several times. Why? And she said, I can't be certain, but I think he said he picks up cans for a living. And I thought, oh, who cares what he does? He can dance. So we danced and danced and drank and drank and danced and drank. About 2 o'clock in the morning, we went back to the bed and breakfast. And the next night, Dawn sends us to a new place. And one of the ladies that had been at the other place was there. And I walked over to her to thank her because she'd really tried to help us. I mean, we were like pathetic, but she still tried to help us. And I talking to her, and she goes, you girls are so kind. And I said, what do you mean kind? Because that's not a word often applied to me. And she said, oh, really? You really were so kind. And I said, what do you mean? She said, you don't know, do you? I said, no, what? She said, that table full of men you danced with all night, they were out on weekend pass from the mental institution. I said, do you know where they are tonight?
But tell about their teeth.
The joke was they were all older, and I was in my 30s. And so the joke was that Diane and I had the only full set of teeth in the place. But, that's a minor exaggeration to make a good story.
It's the best story ever. I love it.
It was so much fun, and I didn't care. I would have danced with a prancing llama if they could dance.
Again, that book has got to be written. I don't know when you're going to do it, but I'll help you sell it to a big house.
Thank
So,
you.
I mean it. I mean it. Your stories are funny. And then you've got to do an audio book where you're telling the stories because it's your voice and you know when to pause at just the right moment to give the zinger. So, yeah. Did anybody else not get to say anything or have a question?
I
Boy,
do.
it's quiet. Tracy, go ahead, Tracy.
You said you went to southern Mississippi, and I was wondering if Elizabeth Bound was there when you were there. She was a writing teacher of mine.
No, Jean Todd Freeman was there, and Gordon Weaver. They were the writing teachers in the English department. Now,
You may have
And
been right there.
Dr. Orange was there too, Carolyn.
Oh, Shakespeare. Yeah. He didn't teach creative writing though.
Right.
Yeah, he taught Shakespeare. Yeah, he was a fearsome dude.
Great. There's a story there. I know there's a story.
No, not with me. I never had him.
Never had him. Okay. Well, anybody else not get to talk?
I had a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Carolyn, do you tell us some of the characters that you have that you modeled after some of your friends?
Well, this is a vicious thing that I do. Poor Lita's caught the brunt of it more than once. But people, when I like them a whole lot, I'll put them in my books. And Alita is a couple, but she's always a dead whore. So just because I can, and KP is she's just a murderess. Nothing really, Kathleen. So yes, but it's fun. I have a good time doing it. And my friends like it too. Yeah.
I'm laughing so hard. This is so funny. It makes me want to go back and read about the dead whore. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Carolyn, did you tell I'm sorry I'm late. I was on another Zoom meeting. Did you tell the story about the sheriff and the eagle? And
No.
No.
That's a good one.
Tell that one.
Well, my mother, who was a journalist, kept a Bearcat scanner on the ironing board in the kitchen because we were both journalists and we needed to follow the cops to know what was going on. But we also got the Game and Fish channel. So, man, it's August, it's wretched, it's terrible. And over the scanner, there's a sick buzzard out on Highway 63 North, and it's flying into trees, and they've called the game warden, and they're going to kill it. And my mother goes,
no,
there's more to this story. She said, grab your camera and get out there. And I'm like, Mama, it's August. Jeez, just breathing in August is tough. Let's, creeping through fields and things. But I go, and sure enough, I took one look at it. It was crashing into trees. But it wasn't a buzzard, it was an eagle. It didn't have a white head. So I'm a big animal person. I don't like to see anything hurt. And they were going to kill it. And I told him, I said, do it. Just do it. I'll see you in federal prison. I'll put you right in jail. It's endangered species. You can't kill it. So it's a set to. Well, across the street was this guy named Bonnie Brown, and he was running for sheriff in the county. And he had naked women tattooed on his arms and he could make them dance. He comes over. He's all involved in this. It's his neighbors, he knows them, and he's like, you can't kill the bird. It is, she's right, it's an eagle. And they said the game warden said we could kill it. And I said, I don't care. He'll go to prison too. You know? So Bonnie pulls me aside and he says, you can't stay out here the rest of your life. You're going to have to pee eventually. And he said, the minute you leave, they're going to kill that bird. And I said, I'll stay as long as I can. And he said, look, I was a marksman in the Army. I think I can wing it and bring it down. And I'll give it to you and you can do whatever you want to with it. And I knew they'd kill it the minute I turned my back. And I told him, I said, shoot it. He shot it, it fell in a pond. He swam out and got it for me. He's holding the bird. This is a 6-foot wingspan. He's holding the bird by his claws. The thing is so emaciated, it doesn't really have any fight left in it. And he's going to give it to me. And I'm like, you're holding the eagle and we're going to the vet. So I took it to my vet and he said, let me work on it. Well, it turned out the eagle had a parasite infection in its eyes and it couldn't see. So it was crashing into trees and it hadn't been able to eat because it couldn't see. And so Carl examined that bird's wing and he told me, he said, there's a spot on the wing like this big that you can bring the bird down and not hurt the wing. And he said, Bonnie hit it.
Wow.
And so he bandaged the wing and got it all set and cleared up the infection in its eyes. And I had to provide fish and chicken and stuff for the eagle. I had to clean its cage every day for him to keep in the vet clinic. And I'd get the eagle out and chase it with a broom to get it to exercise. It was a big bird, but it never made any attempt to hurt any of us. And I did call the Department of Interior and they were really mad at me because I wouldn't tell them who shot it. And I said, it doesn't matter who shot it. What matters is that we saved it. And finally, after my mother talked to them, they decided they didn't have to pursue that angle. They had the bird. We took it to a hawk trainer and it was rehabilitated. And we had this nice ceremony on the banks of the Pascagoula River and set it free.
Oh,
Wonderful.
that is just the best story ever. Thank you for asking her to tell that because I never heard that one before. Man, you could just be storytelling weekend, Wouldn't that be fun? I could just sit all week and listen to you tell stories.
Next time she can tell you one about the wolf.
What? What about a wolf?
My God, Carl, the vet, somebody left a wolf tied to his door.
What?
So I called
a real
Bush
wolf.
Gardens.
A
Yeah,
wolf.
I called Bush Gardens. I called everywhere trying to find a place for the wolf, and nobody would take it. But there was this guy in Cheehaw National Forest who took it. But it was the craziest story because he drove down here to get the wolf, and it had already exploded out of a plastic dog kennel, and we had it in a stainless steel cage from the vet. And the wolf was frantic. I mean, I'd been on Highway 98 with that poor wolf in a cage in the back of a truck, and it was just frantic. And this guy who was going to take it, his name was Carl, and he showed up in my yard, and he looked at the wolf, he looked at me, and he said, you can go ahead and let it out. I'll put it in the truck with me. I said, oh, no, baby. I'm not letting the wolf loose here on my property. I said, you're taking him in the kennel. And he said, but I don't need the kennel. And he walked up to the cage and he put his hand right above the wolf. And the wolf settled down. It was like they had some kind of magical connection. So he took the cage and he took the wolf. And I don't know if he put it in the cab once he cleared off my property or not. But he got it up to Cheehaw. I didn't hear anything and I was really worried. And about a week later, he called me and he said, well, your wolf is okay. He said, it's out with the others. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, I got here and I thought about letting it out. And then I thought maybe I shouldn't because it didn't know where it was. And he said, I could hear the other wolves in the distance. And he thought, well, he'll go be with them. He'll be with his kind. That's what needs to happen to this wolf. And he said, and I opened the cage door and he followed me into the house. He said he lived with me for 3 days. And on the third morning, I got up and we went outside and he could hear the other wolves howling. And he said he ran to the end of the clearing and he turned back, looked at me and howled. And he said, then he went to be with his people.
Oh my gosh. These are such great stories, Carolyn. Thank you for coming tonight. Oh my gosh. Everybody read her books. Read. They're wonderful.
Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it.
You. And this is all being recorded and I will get it up before tomorrow morning so everybody can see it on the YouTube channel and share it, you guys, because I'm telling you, this is a storyteller's dream. Thank you, Carolyn. And everybody read, and keep me posted on everything you're doing, Carolyn, because I can hang out with you, like I said, forever. So
You could go to prison if you knew everything I was doing.
well, you know, I'm a hairdresser. I know how to keep quiet. Okay. You know,
That's a good point.
you don't tell those stories. So, but thank you for sharing yours tonight. And thank you to everybody who came. But before you go, I have a big breaking news announcement. I booked yesterday the venue and the location is set for our 2024 Girlfriend Weekend. You all were going to be back in East Texas, and we're going to be at the Gladewater Student Building Convention Center. It holds up to 600 in Gladewater, Texas, the antique capital of Texas.
Wow.
So we're working on the program. We've got some theater that's going to be involved this year, Jackson's Cozy Theater. We've got, we're working with a hotel on providing rooms with perhaps a shuttle service. So stay tuned, get your packages now, everybody, because the price is going to go up and I'm going to be starting now that I've got the venue to booking everybody in. Carolyn, can you come? Oh my God. I would love for you to come.
I've had a lot of animal deaths, but I still have a lot of animals and I really appreciate it. But I know myself well enough to go, if somebody's sick, I won't enjoy myself. I'll be worried constantly.
I know, but remember there's a boarding place right by my house and Barbara works there and she's just like you. She is.
Oh my God, Kathy, I've got like 15 cats and 7 dogs and 2 horses. It's just, I need a railway car.
You'd go
sweet
broke if you had to board them all.
Yeah. Kathy, what's the closest place to fly into to go to
most
Gladewater?
people that'll probably fly in because they don't want to get on the little jumper flights. We'll fly into Shreveport or Dallas. It's about equal ways. I think it's closer from Shreveport in, but if you're coming from that coast, you'll come into Dallas and it's not that far of a drive. Gladewater is a small town like Jefferson. It is got bed and breakfast. It's got tons of antique stores. It has wine bar. It has the bubble shop. It has tea rooms. You guys are going to love it. Everything's walking distance. So I posted photos of the convention center so you can see what it looks like. But I'll be working on that program now and we'll have it out there. But I would probably fly into Dallas and just rent a car and come over. But it looks like we'll be having some shuttle service once you get here. So we're working on that and it's not that far. Longview is the nearest bigger city and you can fly into that airport. But if you remember the year Carolyn Leavitt came, she got stranded at the Longview airport because her flight was delayed. And when she got in, there was nobody at the airport but her and another author. So they ended up having to rent a limo to go to Nacogdoches, but it is charming. You're going to have a ball. It's January 12th through the 14th. Mark your calendars, and our 24th year, everybody. We're really excited. And I just wanted to tell everybody too, I got another Dolly Parton book today, the Dolly Parton activity book. And then, you know, Madville Publishing has their Dolly Parton book. So we're going to have another Dolly Parton lookalike contest again, and we'll have some winners. And everybody who signs up now is going to get the #1 international bestseller, 8 Rules of Love as Long as Supplies Last. And I read it in one night. It's fantastic. So if you have any questions, email me at thepulpwoodqueen@gmail.com. But I'll have all this up in a press release, but Gladewater. And that's where Stephanie Chance's store is, Decorate Ornate, with all the European treasures. So I know, and my art's in the gallery. There's so much going on there. I think you guys are going to have the time of your lives. So anyway, any questions before we go? All righty, Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Wonderful meeting, and we'll have it up on the Pulpwood Queen channel tomorrow morning. We'll see you down the road, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Carolyn. Bye.
Thank you.